Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Well, I did explain before that I wanted to upload another dream video, and so I thought I would try this again and just to get it off my chest. And I have told many people about it, including my mother. The dream that I'm talking about came many years ago, about 9-10 months after the death of my father in 1996. So that brought us to May 1997, and it was a time of, wow, I wish I could explain it in one word, but I can't. So many new experiences and so many scary feelings and ideas without my father being around my mother and I. It was an incredible year, that year, 1996 to 1997. And this actually took place in the spring. And I did read up a little bit on dreams. I've had this book for years and years and years. And I always know that anytime I dream of a building or a destructed building or a falling building, something like that, it does represent the mind, internal ideas and thoughts that no longer apply. And as far as I'm concerned, that was right on about my previous earthquake dream, decaying building, which was so uncanny, but it meant so many things on different levels. Not only did I dream about something that occurred at that time in another part of the world, but with my friend, his entry into marriage, unbeknown to me at the time, meant that our old ways, our old relationship, our old ideas about each other would no longer apply, because he had now found a new life, a new vocation, and a new wife, and for sure he was going to be growing a new family. And I didn't know that when I dreamt it, but it did turn out to be exactly that. And so this book leaves a lot out, but it does explain some things very well. So I urge anybody out there that if you are having some troubling or scary dreams, it wouldn't hurt to look into it a little bit deeper. I mean, I'm not saying that you should go run out and get psychotherapy. No, but see what you can come up with on your own, and see how it applies to your life, because you never know what you might find out. I think we learn every day through our dreams, and I wish I dreamt more, but when it comes to scary dreams that represent things before they represent things and events before they actually happened, I can kind of do without those kind of dreams, if you know what I mean. May 1997, about my mother and I, closer than ever. She was not a travel bug. I was. And I missed that part of my family. My father was he was the expression of all of my wishes, because what I loved, he did for a living. He had done for a living. So he was very involved in the travel industry, and at the last couple of years of his life, I was right there with him, working alongside him and his partners and all the other travel agents in one office. I treasured I really, really, when I look back on it now, I treasure that time with my dad because I never knew that his life would be cut short so abruptly and so quickly. Just as he was entering the area of his life where he was going to retire and slow down and probably move to another country, because that is what many European families do when they get on in their golden years. They move back to their home country. But that would never be for my dad. And in May of 1997, my mother and I have been undergoing many upheavals in our life, things that we were trying to figure out but just couldn't, things that didn't add up. Mostly about a person who had been left in to take care of my father's estate and to make sure that my mother and I were properly looked after. I mean, it sounds like as though my mother and I were retards or babies. I don't know what you want to make of that, but my father was he didn't treat women like babies. He made sure that they were, how do I say this? He didn't want us to worry about anything. And his life, his business, and everything that went along with it complicated his financial affairs to the point where my mother and I would never have been able to figure out where all those paper trails were going to lead to. And so that's where his business partner came in. And now I have to say that age-wise, my father's business partner, he was actually not a partner of the other 9 partners that my father had across the company. But he was a partner in the office. And we had known him since I was 8 years old. And I was then in my mid-30s. So this gentleman had a brother. No, I've got this wrong. Their wives, there was another gentleman that worked alongside us, and this partner that my father left everything in charge of, and this other guy, their wives were sisters. So there was a lot of family issues there. That part is not so important, but I was very close to these families growing up. I considered them to be almost as uncles or dads. They were in their 30s, 40s, and I was 8, 9 years old when my father opened his business in a mall. So, I had one perspective of my father's business partner. And so it was, you have to bear that in mind when I started to go through these premonitions and these discoveries that were very unpleasant to me and my mom. I also want to say that if it wasn't for me being such a pessimist and a cynic, I don't want to call out anybody or this isn't about hate. This is about shock and learning about people and what makes them tick. And I'm not saying that I was confronted with evil. No, I can't cope with that idea. I was in, however, for a very unpleasant surprise, and so was my mom. We were both in shock and grieving. People, were devastated by the idea that my father was no longer around, but nobody more devastated than my mother and I. So it was a very sensitive and grievous time for me and my mom. My mom, I know she went through a lot of hardship and she didn't want to accept the things that I was trying to tell her about this business partner. And again, I have to say, I don't think he was a bad person, evil. I think he had every intention to make things right in the future when he had the first opportunity, but things started to go very sour very quickly. And so this is when my mother and I embarked on a trip in May 1997. It was a tour of Europe. We would go first to Portugal, then to Spain, then to France, and then to Italy, where we would leave the group and everybody would go home, and we would go and be with loved ones in Italy. And so, I remember my mother fighting it because the poor woman, she developed a bladder infection and she was afraid to go. She couldn't cancel her trip because of a technicality. She couldn't cancel the trip. I was quite frankly relieved that she couldn't, because that would have meant that I'd go all by myself, and I wasn't at the point where I could face strangers by myself. Although the people on the tour were wonderful. We had a wonderful time. My mother tried to have a wonderful time. I had a wonderful time. And it was very exciting for me because I hadn't been that excited since my father purchased the beach house. And we still had it at that point, of course. It was only 1997, and we sold it in 2010. So, the beach house was very much a part of our lives, our everyday life. And I think after beginning a life over by the beach in another country, it left me open, I think, to many new, different ideas and attitudes, and it left me feeling a little bit like the lemonade cleanse. Very close to nature, very close to your emotions, that you're always home no matter where you are. And that's the only way that I know how to describe it. And when I was there at the beach, I was home, and I know that everything, all my senses were very heightened, all my emotions were very heightened, all my ideas, my expressions were at their most creative, and I just came alive at the beach house, and that opened up a real whole new world for me. So going on a trip with my mother, that my mother would never, I have to say, never in her life have gone on a tour of Europe, because she was sickly. She wasn't that healthy. She had heart palpitations, and by this point she had a bladder infection, and she couldn't stand the idea of traveling through Europe by bus and holding her urine. I'm sorry to say it. Until we managed to get to the next stop. That was a nightmare for her before, during, and after the trip. So, but we all survived anyway. However, I remember packing for this trip. My mother and I were so excited. Before she took sick with the bladder infection, we were buying clothes, not too much, because we already had enough, going to the beach house all the time. We had quite a few summery things, but when you're going through Europe and what you wear to a tropical resort, it's a little bit different. So we had to buy a few things, and soon we were ready. We were packed, and our flight left around 8 o'clock in the evening from my city, and it would be an 8-9 hour flight, and we were to land in Rome, and then spend overnight in Rome, and then continue by bus throughout Europe. So my mother was petrified. I was ecstatic. And I did sympathize with my mother, but I thought maybe she should just, not be so nervous and, not worry too much about the bathroom issue, which I know I experienced it myself later on with another tour. It's a real issue. But anyway, we left. We flew over there. The night before we left, I remember being a little anxious and I worried about my mom. And she knew that something was wrong. That she had an idea that something was off. Something that she found on her bed, I think maybe, I don't know, an insect, or maybe she got bitten by a spider. I don't know what it was. It was pretty bad. It was like a premonition of evil, of bad to come. And that was before we left. And so what we did was we just, made sure that we had everything packed. She tried to talk my father's business partner out of it because she was not feeling good. She didn't care about the money, but he made it very clear that she could not cancel, and that if I canceled, it would be a great big loss and I wouldn't go alone. And so there were discussions, eruptions more like it. And, I remember her being so worried and so upset, and knowing that she was leaving and things were not right. She was not in a right frame of mind. And that carried on over to me and my emotions. I knew what she was probably going through. And so it was already starting out a little bit badly. The night before we left, I dreamt a dream that, guys, I will never forget. I will never forget it because it meant so many different things on so many different levels. But I'm only going to spit it out the way that I see it, the way that I interpret it. And I have to tell you that the first of all, it would be almost like a religious retreat. Now, I'm not religious, overly religious. I'm not a prayer fanatic. I'm not, I'm not the best Christian in the world. I do swear from time to time. I'm not perfect. And I'm by no means super religious at all. But this trip was to focus on the spirituality of Europe and churches across Europe. And you know what? At that time in my life, I remember going to church and praying and feeling closer to my dad for some reason. From time to time, that's what I used to do. And it was very hard for me to still accept the fact that my father was actually gone and that he had suffered a great, great deal before he died. And he was brave about it too. I know that we all have somebody like that in our life, a loved one who has tried their best to hide their pain, to spare your feelings. These people are heroic. Anyway, that night I did dream a very weird dream, guys. So bizarre, not in what I saw, but in what it would actually turn out to mean. And mind you, at first when I dreamt it, I had no clue. To me, it was just a scene. So I'll explain it, and I'll start first with the scene, and then I'll go into the history of the place where that scene actually was. Not too much of the history, but just a little bit. So in my dream, I dreamt of a white house with kind of a thatched roof, and it was wavering between color and black and white. It was outside, of course, and I saw little gravel stones along the edge of the house and kind of a gravelly pathway or driveway. The way that I saw it, it looked more like a driveway to me. And the house was white. It had a couple of windows. And I remember that scene very vividly. It was a kind of a cloudy day, and then it turned into a clear blue day. So the lighting and the perspective kept changing. And so a little bit later in that dream, maybe just a few minutes later, I don't know how long it was. My concept of time in dreams is not too great. So I remember being in a kind of a darkened elevator in a hotel, obviously anticipating my travels in Europe. And I remember there was nobody on the elevator but myself, or so I thought. And then I was waiting for the floor to arrive. But while I was waiting for the elevator to go to its destination, which I assumed to be some hotel room in a hotel, I felt a tap on my shoulder, and I can't remember if it was my right or my left, because that could be very important. But for the life of me, I can't remember what side. I have a feeling it was my left. I can't be sure. I turned around, and this is creepy. Lo and behold, my dad standing behind me, tapping me on the shoulder, and his eyes, guys, just the way he looked before he took his last breath. He had sat up, right upright in the bed, and he couldn't really move. He was basically paralyzed from the legs down up, or the waist down, I should say. And I remember my father, before he took his last breath, he sat up with his eyes wide as if he was going to try to tell me something. And he said my name. My mother had been standing at the doorway talking to a nurse, something like that. And she was there. And he said my name. And then he passed away. He just passed away. So when I think of my father in that dream, who was tapping me on the shoulder and had these wide eyes, it was almost as though he was referring back to a thought process that he had been having in the hospital after finalizing his will with the lawyers. Not a good idea or time or place to do a will, right? But because my uncle had moved to Italy, Florence, Italy, to teach, he could no longer be our executor, so my father had to make another will. It was awful, guys. What I saw in that dream, I relived the day that my father passed away. And it was very hard for me to stand there in the dream and wait for my father to, give a further response. And I kept waiting like that. And he just fell back and closed his eyes. That was it. What a dream. That was scary, creepy, very sad. It gave me such a horrible premonition of, what was to come. I had an indication that it might have referred to something that was going to happen on the trip. And mind you, certain things did happen on the trip, but it wasn't bad or it wasn't life-shattering. However, here's what I think might have been occurring. I have a feeling that because we were traveling to Fatima, Portugal, as our first stop, my father, in some way, he was going to be there. He was trying to communicate something, and it had to do with the timing, again, the time of the trip. And I've been trying to make sense of it all these years, and I can't get it just quite right. You know what I'm saying? I can't exactly get it down pat. But the history of Fatima, Lucia of Fatima, Sister Lucia of Fatima, Lucia Santos, she is the key to the whole thing. Now, she passed away in 2005 as an elderly nun who had received so many premonitions during her childhood and her adulthood. She wrote about them. I had a book about it, but somebody bought it and never bought it back. But I remember reading the book and knowing the story. I'm familiar with the story, but I bought the book over there. I didn't buy it when I had the dream. Guys, this is, I don't understand. So, this little girl, when she was 6 years old, she had her communion. Now, she was born in 1906, and she had two younger little cousins, a male and a female, Francisco and Jacinta. They lived right across the road from Lucia. So I remember Lucia's first vision of the Virgin Mary was when she was 8 years old. And I remember reading that Jacinta and Francisco used to go with Lucia to tend the sheep. They were shepherds. They used to go out into the fields and tend the sheep. And this Madonna apparition used to allegedly appear to them. I don't think those kids would lie. I mean, the family was very humble. The mother didn't want Lucia to be involved with the church. She didn't want Lucia to learn how to pray. Something was wrong there. I don't know what it was all about. But Lucia's dad taught her how to pray. He encouraged her to go to church and to be religious and to be very devoted and stick with her prayers and do everything that a good Christian should do. But her mother didn't want her to say the rosary. She didn't want her child to learn how to read or write. Well, it could be very old school too. I'm not sure. I didn't get into that. The book didn't get into anything further than that. But as time went on, I remember reading that Jacinta and Francisco also saw the apparitions. And in 1916, Francisco died of pleurisy, and there was a flu going around before the 20s. And Jacinta passed away 2 years later in 1918. And the tour that we went on, explained that this was the house that the children died in. Francisco didn't want to go into the hospital anymore. He made the doctors release him home where he died. Such a sad story, guys. Anyway, with my mother and the rest of the tour group, we went to see that house where Lucia lived with her family and her little cousins just across the road. And guys, I'm telling you, I said to my mother, I said, I can't understand what's going on. And she said, what are you talking about? She said, this house, I've seen it before, but I don't know anything about this tour. I don't know anything about this house. I've never, quite frankly, guys, I had barely ever even heard of Fatima. So I didn't know anything at all about Lucia's life story. I hadn't even purchased the book at that point. Exactly like in my dream. Exactly, guys, exactly. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was my father tapping me on the shoulder and pointing. I forgot to mention that he was pointing over there. He wanted me to pay attention to something that was going on. And the only thing that I can think of is that he was trying to let me know, and guys, I took his advice. He was trying to let me know that there was something going on at home that I needed to be taken care of. And I remember my father pointing way out over there before he closed his eyes and leaned back. Over there. He didn't talk, but he was pointing over there. And I thought, what does he mean? What does he mean? And I'm still thinking that I'm not sure, what did he mean? What did he mean? You know, because at that point when you're dreaming and you see a scene, you don't know what to make of it. At that point, I didn't understand what I was seeing. And I, frankly, to this day, I still don't. But when my father leaned back, I had a very bad premonition that whatever he was trying to refer to would come to rock my mother and I for the rest of our lives. And actually it did. It still is. It shattered our peace, it shattered our lives, it shocked us, it took away our joy, it took away our sense of security. We could never let our guard down from then on. So, as I explain this, I have to even mention that I took numerous photographs of, then the cameras were not that great. Numerous photographs of the surroundings of Lucia's house when it was our first day of the tour after Rome. No, the second day of our tour. The first day was in Rome in Colosseum, and then we took off by bus for Fatima. And so we got there about 5-ish, and then this would have been the next morning. And it was a beautiful retreat, guys. I do remember that we would have sunshine in every city that we went to throughout that tour. I think it was a two-week tour. And by the next morning, the rain would start. So it would be sunny when we got there in the afternoon and raining by the next morning. That was, to me, such a premonition of misfortune. So I remember going the next morning after we arrived there. This would have been, I think, our third day. And I had my camera. And, at that point, I'd only dreamt about my father in a kind of unpleasant way. And so I had no idea what was coming. And I remember not being able to believe this house, how similar it was to my dream when I got in front of it. And it was a kind of view that we couldn't see it clearly until we got right in front of it. I don't remember what was in front of us. Maybe it was the bus or certain vehicles or other things. I don't know. But I remember it being right up front, all of a sudden, just the way it was in my dream. The same color, the same style, the same surroundings. Incredible, guys. All stone and brick, white paint, thatched roof, pebbles and cobblestones on the driveway. Exactly like my dream. I can't believe it. Anyway, I took all these pictures inside, outside. None of them turned out. That was weird. That was weird. That was so weird. I guess somebody was trying to tell me, you've already seen this. You don't need to be taking pictures of it. And that's what I got out of it. But I was told that phenomenon happens quite frequently there. I think it's more like, something to do with electricity or digital cameras. I don't know what. But I lost all my footage of Fatima. And I'll never be able to go back there because I wouldn't go alone. I'd be too nervous, to put it that way. That was that trip. And we went many other cities and places and saw many other sites, and it was a wonderful trip. But throughout the trip, by the time we got to Italy, now here's my first inkling of disaster. My uncle, my father's brother, whom I hadn't spoken to basically since the funeral, and we had been always so close. He used to call long distance every week when my father was alive. And I understand it could have been depressing for him, and he took my dad's death very hard, but to just turn like that. So I knew something was wrong, and when my mother and I tried to call Florence to speak to him, I'd already been to his house the summer before with my father. They wouldn't speak to us. Him and my step-aunt, they wouldn't speak to us. Finally, my mother called my dad's partner in our home city, and she said this and this, and I can't go without seeing him because, that's just the way she felt. She felt horrible. And so did I. I couldn't understand what was going on. Why do people shut down like that? So, I didn't know at the time that my father's business partner, and maybe other people as well, was starting to try to alienate him from us. Because, my uncle was our protector. He would have protected us. So, for the things that were about to follow, my dad's business partner obviously couldn't have that protection for us. He had to get rid of it. Guys, I can't begin to explain to you how scary it was to have my beloved uncle no longer want to see me or talk to me or deal with me simply because my father was gone. A real uncle doesn't do that, and I know that that's how death does affect some people. I couldn't understand it. I still don't. My uncle has since passed away, but I could never forget that. I can't forgive and forget what I don't understand. And not to say that I began to express anger toward him, Um, I just felt so lost. I was lost. I was one of the apples, one of the many apples of my uncle's eye. And, since I was a tiny baby, it's hard for me to explain this, but I just didn't understand what was going on with my uncle and who was manipulating him. I can't to this day figure it out. I have a pretty good idea of who and what and why, but I don't understand on his part why he did that. Anyway, to make a long story a little bit shorter, that was the first sense of premonition of disaster, impending disaster. That should have told us everything, but it didn't. It just threw us out a little news flash. Hey, things are changing, for the worse. Bye. That dream, guys, showed me everything. For years I've been trying to shut down whenever I think about it, but I know that dream is the key to everything that's been going on in my life, everything that happened in the following year. And it would have been incredible for us if I hadn't have remembered that dream and my father pointing, going, he was trying to be as emphatic. He wouldn't talk. He wouldn't talk. I know my mother talks in my dreams about her, but my father never talks, and he wouldn't talk. I guess he was speechless, like I was. What happened, guys, was that when we got back from the trip around June, we came back to our city, and I remember we went to the airport, and my father's partner was there, and he picked us up, and already I could sense that something was a little bit off. He was very abrupt and rushed and hurried, and almost as if he was guilty about something. That's really the only thing that I can relate it to. It looked to me that he was guilty about something, and I don't know what. Maybe he was, at the time I brushed it off as his being preoccupied with something. And so the months wore on, and things began to happen. Things, when life changes and you can't put your finger on exactly why, but so many things start changing all at once. And he was doing things, the partner was doing things that he most likely should not have been doing at all. And I was always the rebellious, not drastically rebellious, but compared to my mother has always been passive. Me, I like to challenge and rebel. That's me. I think I'm still like that way up to a certain point, I think. But anyway, it's weird that it took me months and months and months to try to put my finger on it. And I remember, guys, my mother started having dreams as well. And I remember we were looking for a document that was necessary for court, for probation, the probation of my father's will. Something. I can't remember now what it was that we were looking for, but it was a document that should have existed, but was nowhere to be found. Not the will. Not the will. So I remember my mother explaining to me that she found the document because my father came to her in a dream and showed her where it was. So, you know, that was so weird. He communicated with her openly, but I think when he was trying to communicate with me, I always had the idea that it had something to do with where we were heading to, and maybe that Lucia, Sister Lucia, might have been, I don't know, she was very adept at picking up premonitions and communicating without words and speech. I always linked it to her helping out my dad, trying to show me what to be careful of. So push comes to shove, shove comes to pull, whatever have you. We roll back all the way down to November, December, and I remember that certain things were to be settled in court and certain things just never were. Actually, my father's will, under his partner's administration, the will never got probated. It never got turned into the lawyer. It was awful. I don't know what was going on, guys. I really don't know what was in his mind. I guess he wasn't clear enough on how to administrate an estate and what the process was for wills. But we were not, he was giving us advice on, you know, canceling my father's bank things and the car things, and it was a whole process that was very grieving for us. I remember it was very hard to do all that. But eventually, all that, we got past all that, and it was still that things that should have been passed to us, it just wasn't happening. And we later found out that, much later, when we hired lawyers, that it was because he didn't do the right things. Not only didn't he do the right things, but guys, while we were in Europe, he began to construct himself a home. Now, I'm not saying that he was I'm not saying anything except the objective truth, and you have to make what you have to make of it, and his personality and his character. He was known to have lost investments, money, huge amounts of money all at once. He was a little reckless with money in the past, allegedly. And so my father, you know, I don't know how to explain this. My father probably was afraid that he might take another risk with us. And he actually did. He actually took some of that capital. And I should add, by the way, quickly here, and remind you that I did tell you my father sold his business when he was just about being hospitalized. So the money, it was there. But some of it went missing. And I don't know the whole story. I'm just telling you what I know. I'm not making any judgments on his character because I knew this person when I was 8 years old. And I can't believe that anybody would do that who was so close to my dad. So close. So anyway, I tried at that point to tell my mother that what's going on isn't right. The biggest indicator to me that something was really wrong was that my father's car, we had a Lancia, uh, a standard Lancia, a white one, which he drove to work with me in it every day. And we didn't even get a chance to go through his belongings or see what was there, or he just took it. He came to the condo one day and just took it. That's what I remember. My mother was shocked. But because my father gave power of attorney to him, he could have taken our house. The way that it was in that unprobated will. Now I know why he didn't probate it. Then I knew too why he didn't probate it, because he could continue to make errors in his favor. But guys, I'm not saying that he never would have paid it back. I don't know. It's just that to go through something like that and not know what's going on, and it's repeated when you're grieving over a loved one, I can't understand why he chose to do that to us. Now, the biggest inkling, this made me so mad. So mad. I can't remember if it was immediately after my father passed away in 1996, or was it that year following? I think it was that following year, 1997. We always went to our beach condo at Christmas time or holiday time, maybe the day after Christmas, something like that. Well, you know what? We couldn't go. We were going to be, very hard for me to talk about this. We would have felt so close to my dad at a time that we needed to feel that closeness after having missed him like that. My father's business partner took the apartment, the condo keys, and gave it to his family, like his extended family members. Do you know how that made us feel? And he knew that we went down every holiday. What was he thinking? That he could get away with it? Well, he didn't. He just got away with it once. After that happened, guys, and I remember us going down after these people finally left. I went into the office one day after we had come back from our vacation. And I said, by the way, where are those extra set of keys or something like that? I can't remember. And he pulled them out of his desk. And I said, well, thank you very much. Bye. He was shocked. He never went back. He never went back. I was livid with him. How dare he? How dare he? Let me say one thing first. I always, and I will continue to enforce this to anybody out there who disagrees with what I'm going to say, because I know they will. There will be people who tell me to, you're full of you-know-what. I always wanted to extend anybody's invitation to come. But when we were present, and that condo, that beach house, the owners didn't like people coming in and then leaving, and they weren't the owners. It took me a long time to realize that. They hated people that gave the key out. It was years of hell that I went through trying to get my mother to understand this, and she wouldn't listen to me. She was stubborn, But that episode with the condo and giving my keys to his sons and daughter, and I was home crying for my father. All of our friends were there. It wasn't enough to convince my mother that something was wrong. I didn't know what to do. I spent from November of that, I think it was 1997, after the European tour, to the following April, May, telling my mother, when are you going to stop this? Can't you see that something's wrong? Something's wrong. You have to go to a lawyer. You have to see a lawyer. And that's when she started looking for papers. And when she finally found the paper that we didn't know where it was, there was a forged signature on it. And my father told her where to find it. Guys, I don't know, but it spelled disaster. All the dreams and the premonitions and the weird things that went on before and after Europe and during Europe, and then when we got home again, it was just a total nightmare. And most of that nightmare was me trying to deal with my blind mother. She hung on to him as though he was a hero. Well, wait a minute. If he's such a hero, why is there a forged signature on Daddy's paper? Something is wrong. Something is wrong. And my father had a stamp, a notary stamp. I showed it to you in another video. That wasn't his signature. Somebody forged it. When my mother saw that, she finally found that paper. When she saw it, she took it to her family, and then they helped her get a lawyer. And my mother had so many people rallying around her. At that time, we were very close with our family. Now I've been distanced. I've been estranged from my mom's family and my dad's family for many, many years because of all this. Not all relatives, just the major bulk of them. And I can't handle it. The grief of losing my father and my family was too much for me, because certain people put bugs in their ear, and they knew what to say about me right away. They were the first person that turned against me. You know, my closest circle. And I decided not to fight it, not to put too much importance to it, because, you know, I'm trying to deal with the business of life, and I can't really stop and cry at everything that everybody thinks and says to me or thinks about me. I'm heartbroken that I lost family members over this, but the judges went with us. What I went through, and my mom, I mean, I'm not saying that he would have done anything more or anything further, but he committed stupid mistakes that should never have occurred. And that dream when my father was pointing all the way over there, he was pointing home to call my attention to something that he was doing against us behind our backs. Okay, he wasn't a murderer, he wasn't a bank robber. In my opinion, he was a lot worse than that. How can you do that to somebody who trusts you? I don't wanna cry anymore, but that dream, guys. This was 1 year before I found out that my friend who moved to California was actually trapped in an earthquake. Was that my dad again? You know, trying to tell me that you were right in your dreams before. Remember your dream? That's when he was alive. But was my father trying to communicate to me in dreams because he knew I had that sensitivity that I could actually feel things out before they came to a head. I don't know. I think Sister Lucia had something to do with it. It's uncanny. It's uncanny that this dream should have come right before I saw the house. I saw it in my dream, and then I traveled halfway across the world, and I saw it in real life. I don't understand that. That was in itself scary, but my father appearing in that dream and asking me to pay attention. That's why I was so insistent with my mother after she had the dream about him telling her where to look for that paper, that document. I told her, he's trying to tell you what I'm telling you. And I told her about the dream. I think I told her before, and then I reminded her. And she said, you're right, you're absolutely right. She said, this can't go on. And your father came to both of us in a dream. And we have to listen to him. Well, finally, thanks. He had to tell you somehow because you weren't listening to me. But my mother was in shock. She couldn't believe that this partner that we spent many, many years with at his house, barbecue, baptisms with his children, weddings, we couldn't believe that he would carelessly do that. He was reckless. It was reckless. That was criminal. The judge saw it as criminal. And when my father's will was probated and came out of court and worded differently because it was the way my father had done it was a little hard to understand. So what I went through, working nights in a department store and then going to court without any sleep, I thought I was going to lose my mind. Going through something like that with somebody that you trust and ending up in court with them over all that money that he took. It was too much for me, guys. To this day, it's not that I don't want to trust anybody, but I spent an entire lifetime knowing this person, and so did other people. And he managed him, I'm not sure if it was him or other people as well, to turn everybody that knew us against us in order to do the deeds that he wanted to do. He couldn't accomplish it with all people's support. He had to get rid of that support. You see how things work out? That's what my father was trying to tell me. Boy, I never knew what to think or what to say regarding that dream, but I sure have spent a lot of time trying to figure out exactly why then, why there. Well, because that's where all the premonitions and apparitions appeared, and he wanted me to see something as well, but I couldn't understand what he wanted to say, and now I do. I mean, I understood it as soon as all those things started going wrong. I understood it then, but it took me a few months. But I knew right away when we were trying to visit my uncle that something was really, really wrong. It was, you don't know the feeling. You travel all that way across the world to see a loved one and they don't want to talk. So, my uncle did call years later. We tried to have a conversation, and I told him, I said, I don't know what I did. I don't know what I did to you. And he said, you know what? You know very well what you did, and if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you. He said, if you don't stop pretending, I'm going to hang up on you. I don't understand what he meant. And I said, you know what? I think I'll save you the trouble. Let me hang up on you. And I did. I was so hurt, guys. I don't know what I did. I don't know what I did. I'm sure I did something awful. I'm not perfect. But I didn't do it to him. I mean, I didn't do it to anybody. I'm a very private person. And I don't hang out my dirty laundry unless I have to. But for the life of me, I don't understand what my uncle meant. And for him to abuse me verbally like that, it must have been horrible. But anyway, I don't hate anybody. I still cared very deeply for my uncle. I was proud of him. He wrote books. I studied them in university. He was pretty much respected by many people. I won't say all, but many. It's incredible how it all played out. Once people part ways, that's pretty much it, isn't it? At least that's the way it went with my life. All my goodbyes seem to be so permanent. Anyway, guys, I hope that you have learned or been able to enjoy something from all of this. I can't say that anybody could learn from this because I'm still trying to figure out what happened. But anyway, I hope that you did enjoy it. I hope, I want to thank you for watching to the end. And it's not as intense a dream as the earthquake dream was, but it was still really spooky. This one was spooky. It never left me. It never left me, guys. I'm never gonna forget that dream. Anyway, I thank you for watching, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll talk to you very soon. Ciao, ciao.